Awesome. I've hit record, Inayat, and welcome again to Mindless Business Without Anxiety. And we have been talking about AMPLE, AMPLE, and in some of the episodes, we are talking what is A for, what is M for, and so forth. And it's my privilege to today ask you, Inayat, about P, P for physical. And please tell me,
What
over to
is the
you.
P? What
What
is
is
the
the
P?
P in ample?
Okay. Well, look, I'm sure everyone knows, um, whether you call it physical education, PE, or
Hmm.
physical therapy, many are
Right.
aware. Essentially, we're talking about movement and exercise, right?
Oh, you
Talking
have
about
E later as well, isn't it? P, E, and E is for
indeed.
education. There is as
E
well.
is
Wow.
specifically for education, right?
Right.
And education being relating to the cognitive functions. So,
Mm-hmm.
more on the basis of uh, academia, problem solving, like speech therapies, like all those kind of things, right? And obviously, again, educating people upon therapy just as a whole.
Correct.
And so anyway, but going back to the physical,
Mm-hmm.
because that's from my teaching experiences, right? I worked in a lot of special educational needs environments and things alike. Um,
Mm-hmm.
However, alongside that, I've always been somebody who was very keen on sports. So actually, the
Right.
two segue, the fact that you brought it up,
Mm-hmm.
and at the early stage of my career, whilst being a teacher, an English teacher, I was given the opportunity to work as a PE teacher as well.
Mm-hmm.
And how all of these things are, building blocks for your own learning and understanding of the whole kind of structure. And in being a martial arts enthusiast myself as a student, and then later becoming a coach, in having addiction problems. So then, as those addiction problems started to snowball and manifest more and more, my coping mechanisms were always physical therapy, physical exercise,
Right.
before even the mental.
Right.
Before
Yeah.
I went to a rehabilitation center, before I went to counseling, before anything else, what I used to do at the initial outset was lock myself away from whatever the poison was, go
Mm-hmm.
do a geographical, stay in another area, move to another country, and then I would just exercise like mad. Once my body came back to, wellness, and
Yeah.
even before that, even just to get the body back to functioning mentally and physically because of the abuse I'd given it,
Right.
it was just such an innate kind of coping mechanism, which I'm so grateful for, because now as a therapist, when I try to help people across the board in multiple areas of mental health and well-being, um,
Mm-hmm.
you recognize whether it's, as in my case, addiction issues, which
Mm-hmm.
everything is just a manifestation of your lack of coping with emotion,
Mm-hmm.
which then manifests in thoughts, and then
Mm-hmm.
not being able to cope with the thoughts. So you try to escape yourself, but usually through something destructive, through a behavior, whatever that
Yeah.
be.
I was about
And
to come to that point because
yeah,
physical can be positive physical or helpful physical
yeah,
and unhelpful physical. For example, if someone's coping mechanism to worry and anxiety would be to do nothing or to sit and watch Netflix, and because their body is finding that as a familiar territory at that point, once they taste it, for example, you mentioned that even as a child, you used to, or a young adult, you used to resort to something that helped you, and there is a chemical reaction happening inside that makes you feel, you know what, this is the answer. It helps me feel better, feel safe. It helps you express. We talked about expression when we were talking about arts in A.
mhm,
But on the other side, a small physical habit not done can add up to a bad habit as well, right? And it unfortunately will change something that makes us even more worried or anxious. And
well, yeah, no, yeah,
yeah.
go on, yeah, yeah, no,
No,
I
I
was
was
just,
smiling because I remembered that you play football with youngsters, and you still
but
consider yourself a 15-year-old.
yeah, yes, no, I do, and that's a great segue actually, because interestingly, on my way. to football. I believe, or maybe actually it was on the way back. But either way, the point was, I got an Uber, and I was talking to the gentleman driving, and they were like, "Oh, so you're playing football?" And obviously, they noticed my age from my beard,
Right.
and so he inquires, "How old are you specifically?" So
Mhm.
when I said, like, I'm 40
104.
now, nearly 41. Um, he was like, "Oh wow." Do you know what his response was?
Right.
How do you find the time to work and play football?
Right.
And I found that really interesting. I said to him, obviously, that I played on Monday and Wednesday.
Mhm.
So he was already thinking, wow, that's a lot, twice in a week already.
Mhm.
Um, and so, I jestfully kind of spoke around my personal circumstance. I teach MMA and this and that and whatnot. So I need to keep fit. I need to, for the youngsters, for coaching, this, that, etc. But when I started delving into the emotional side of things,
Mhm.
he started opening up and explaining how much he struggled with his
Right.
own self esteem, well being, mental health as a result of having stopped these things and prioritizing, obviously, which we have to our responsibility,
Mm.
but to the extent whereby he's neglected himself
Mhm.
physically. And he was directly relating it to he now recognizes how badly it also affects his mental health.
Here is a good time to share with our audience something that we were discussing, and you know that we already collaborate with a lot other professionals, and
Yeah,
some of the physios have given me data from various universities in the world.
yeah,
100% of the time, you do something physical for 5 minutes
yeah.
to improve your mental health or improve your mood,
Hmm.
change your anxiety to something else.
Hmm.
Or if you do something non-physical, for example, listen to someone on YouTube, or
Hmm.
do motivational affirmations, or write down your thoughts, or something non-physical, 100% of the time, the physical thing, even done for 5 minutes, is at least 1.5 times more useful in changing your mood, changing your mental health, and of course it helps your physical health because it's physical exercise. So, like, I compare it with taking shower. You cannot take a shower and say, uh, I'll take a shower next month, because you need to do it every day. You need to make a habit out of it.
I hope
You
people do.
cannot. Yeah, exactly. uh, and Like that, we need
Hmm.
to make it like a small habit every day. Otherwise, we are going to have a compound impact of missing it every day. Like your friend in the Uber mentioned that it has been affecting his self-esteem, it has been affecting something else inside, because he
Hmm.
is not doing this outside. And it's more
Um,
important for men, they have found, especially after the age of 40. Like women go through various changes in hormones, even men go through it. And one of the best ways to bring back your mental health within hours is to do something physical.
it's interesting you mentioned the hormones, because many of my friends, they do light exercise,
Hmm.
but some, averse to doing, let's say, weights and things like that. What I
Hmm.
try and explain to them, though, is that as you age, you're not building as much testosterone, for
Right.
instance,
Yeah.
um, and it's because your muscles are decreasing.
Hmm.
So it's not, not everyone has to be a power lifter or a bodybuilder, but if you just, start doing a little bit extra, you'll
Hmm.
recognize a hormonal change in yourself, the way you
Correct.
feel,
Hmm.
thereafter. And like you
Hmm.
say, from a chemical standpoint of the brain,
Hmm.
I'm not a scientist, but I'm an enthusiast, and I kind of research a lot, and I know within it, how much you gain chemically
Hmm.
in change from,
Yeah.
say, doing some exercise.
Yeah.
So whilst the we've talked about mental health, we've talked about artistic, mental health. I think when I approach my clients from a coaching perspective or from a therapeutic, as a therapist, a hypnotherapist, rapid transformational therapist, I'm trying to get to the root of the problem.
Right.
That is something which is it's a long-term vision of work, right? So whilst it has and makes great shifts for people,
Mm-hmm.
it also is something that is relative to the individual and it takes time. So
Mm-hmm.
in the interim, when one is struggling, because
Mm-hmm.
there's no magic switch to dealing with all one's traumas,
Mm-hmm.
this is the highest on my list in terms of, let's say, emergency coping mechanism. When my
Correct. Yeah.
brain struggling, I can try and be artistic,
Mm-hmm.
but for some reason, it only uh, eliminates certain elements for me, because the
Mm-hmm.
expression is great, but if I haven't rewired my brain as yet through the
Yeah.
mental work, as I
Yeah.
say, I find it still is slightly temporary, whereas physical, it does something I can't
It's more
explain it.
permanent. So
Yeah,
here I'll add uh, a worrisome statistic.
yeah,
Again, I don't have the numbers to hand, but people can easily Google it because it's now well known. Uh, and I'll give you 3 points related to testosterone.
please.
And again, I'm borrowing from other such workshops, but these are proven facts about mental health. They
Hmm.
found when the daylight changes, the clock changes in different countries,
Hmm.
the number of men having cardiac arrest in the entire world
Hmm.
spikes up,
Oh wow. Okay.
and it spikes down for women. And they were and in fact, if you Google which day or which time is the highest amount of cardiac arrest,
Hmm.
and they started coinciding with daylight savings. And later they started doing studies. When the
Hmm.
clocks change, on average, men,
Yeah.
they don't sleep as usual as just before the clocks change. So there is always a 1 hour gap.
Really.
A 1 hour of missing sleep,
Hmm.
especially if you are dehydrated or if there are other issues like alcohol, etc.
Yeah.
Now here comes the T word, changes your testosterone temporarily,
Hmm.
up to the extent that within that 1 hour, your body is 10 years older. So if you are 37, the average testosterone levels
Hmm.
are of a 47-year-old for that 1 hour time. Now, that affects muscles. You were talking about muscles, which
Hmm.
relates to the heart muscle, which relates to the cardiac arrest. And the fastest way to bring back your testosterone levels, meaning if you want to quickly feel your age
Yeah.
or even 10
Yeah.
years younger, three things: drink water, sleep an hour extra, and take deep breath, especially from the belly. And if you do these three things, b-
Hmm.
breathing deep from the belly,
Hmm.
and then you measure your testosterone,
Hmm.
have enough water. It has to
Hmm.
be water. It cannot be alcohol. It cannot be Lucozade or anything, or it cannot be other kind of substances, sports nutrition or something. It has to be water, and then you
Hmm.
measure testosterone. Or if you're not feeling yourself, take a power nap and then measure your testosterone,
Hmm.
and then your testosterone goes down to your younger version, to a healthier version, and that
That's
directly affects what you are doing, your mental health. That's the chemical thing happening in the background.
well.
So
This is
if you
this is why I say it's
yeah,
it's one of the overarching coping mechanisms I find, like an umbrella, because you can also match it with others. So like if you put the artistic and the physical together, you do
yeah,
some performing arts. It's magical, right?
yeah,
If you go for a walk in nature,
hmm,
and you spend time, in that again space, like it's amazing how the physical, because it's the vehicle for your body, right?
yeah,
So, and your mind obviously needs to focus on sending messages to the body. So when you're doing physical things, so even like you say, breathing, it's
yeah,
still a physical therapy. Your diet is still a
mhm,
physical aspect of therapy, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
it's acknowledging the fact that I am, whilst a spiritual energy, I am in physical matter, and these messages that go through my body and through my brain,
Yeah.
they really matter in the sense that if I am not in control of it, from a kind of a conscious standpoint, let me engage the subconscious and just move. And
Inayat, I've heard
it's
from
amazing.
people that you are a great dancer. Tell,
Oh
tell,
gosh,
tell,
who's been
tell,
telling you this?
tell me about dancing.
A
Tell,
little
tell me
dance, yeah.
about dancing and how you feel when you're dancing, because that has direct relationship with how you're feeling. It's physical.
Yeah, it's again, it's I don't know, the audio's gone a little quiet.
Okay.
It so dancing in itself, like I heard this statement the other day, like confidence in dancing is dancing like you nobody is watching in essence, right? I'm paraphrasing a little
Yeah.
bit. Um,
Yeah.
you're in a flow state. You're feeling frequencies of sound and energy, and you're just moving with that energy, right? Obviously, if one can coordinate and one has timing,
Hmm.
it looks nice as well, right? But regardless of that,
Right.
it's
I like the way how you put it.
regardless of that, it's interesting because yeah, I think that in my culture and my faith, it was seen
Hmm.
as something very wrong. You don't
Right.
dance. So
Mm.
I didn't actually dance until I was probably about 17. I didn't know
Okay.
what dancing was.
Hmm.
Um, and like most forbidden fruits, if you
Hmm.
find some benefit within it,
Hmm.
you can get quite obsessive about it because it's new. So I
Hmm.
was very curious, and so for many years in my kind of 17 to, let's say, mid 20s,
Hmm.
I was obsessed with like just that flow state of dance, right? And I learned a lot through it. So every now and then, even in my adult life now, I like to experience a little bit of that flow state. Because even like martial arts, this is the thing. I liken it to that, and I find a lot of martial artists are good dancers because it's breaking down physical movement in a
Right.
repetitive format where your
Yeah.
focus is literally on the steps,
Yeah.
and it's just the next movement of the body.
Right.
There's nothing else really to think about other than, do I shift my head left? Do I raise my shoulder? Do I throw this hand? Do I take a step back? Do I circle? Like, and it's all, as I say, it's very laser focused. So again,
Am I
it's in
right in
flow
saying
state
that?
and inviting.
Am I right in saying that when you're anxious or not in the best state of your mental health, you're thinking a
Yeah.
lot, but when you're doing something physical, including dance, which is so happy, your hundreds of millions of thoughts are now becoming lesser and lesser, and then you kind of become more mindful of the moment. I mean, of course, they become natural as you practice, but your brain is not thinking 2000 thoughts, it's
Well, that's why, look,
coordinating there.
no, again, like, look, it's interesting that you mentioned that sentence because there's freestyle and there's choreographed, right?
Mm.
Choreograph, often you don't find, unless it's a really dramatic performance which has a narrative behind it,
Hmm.
it will become like work again, right? It will become something that you have to think about to some degree,
Correct. Yeah.
until it
Yeah.
becomes muscle memory. Whereas freestyle dance is just being in a moment, in a state of flow. So again, there's slight differences, but both have therapeutic elements to them. But
Yeah.
yeah, if you ask people, how do you achieve a more freer mind state within the movement of dance, it's going to be in a free state, right? Where you don't have to
Nice.
think. I don't have to
I,
think, oh, am I moving left with everyone else, or am I moving right with everyone else? You just move, right?
you just move. Yeah.
But yeah, I think to relate it back full circle again to why do we do these things? What is the point of it? Because not everyone has the time, like
Hmm.
I mentioned before about our Uber friend, um,
Hmm.
to balance their life in the way of play. As you
Hmm.
said to me, I'm like a 15-year-old in a 40-year-old or 50-year-old's body now because I got this injury in my foot. That's why people must be wondering, where am I? I'm always lying down on my hypnotherapy bed because I've always
Right.
got some nursing to do. I've got my foot elevated at the moment, like like, I
Right.
don't know if you can see it, but like but yeah, because to a certain degree, I like to test my body because it's
Mm.
testing my mind, right? I
Understood.
like to play with youngsters and see what the body can achieve. It keeps me excited still about life. You know, my days are not monotonous then, they're not robotic, you know. There's
That's
still
true.
element of creativity constantly, and that to be done within the physical exhausts you as well, so that you have good sleep, so that you know you sweat out your toxins, so that you there's so much, like we talked about, the mental side, right? There's team sports, so there's bonding, you know.
Hmm.
There's individual sports where you know you're competing with yourself, but there's so many things that sport has taught me. It's like we used to say to young boys who are like a bit unruly, go down the boxing club. Why are all these things, you know, so well known in some
Mm.
way, but yet sometimes in the corporate world we forget about it. It's interesting, but yeah, I suppose I'm just fortunate that within my work I get to still do a lot of physical things, because I recognize in these conversations with other people who are really just struggling to maintain their responsibilities, their families, their bills, etc. The body gets neglected, especially when we work more and more on these things, technology,
Yeah,
and we're at
exactly.
screens
Yeah.
for most of the day in chairs, right?
And
So
sat
yeah, it's
down.
really
Yeah,
interesting. I
yeah,
could go
just
on and
sat
on, as
down.
you know.
In fact, when we do the support groups inside of companies, we go and do mindly workshops, and we tend to create an internal support group so that they don't need us. They can just talk to each other. So many of them, some of them create a coffee club, some of them create, let's say, a golfing club or something. But there is a lot of running clubs or jogging clubs, and just three or four people, both men and women, and they can go for a walk or a jog during work or lunchtime to take a short break. And many of them are using a standing desk, sitting desk, which can be changed accordingly so that you can change your physical thing rather than sitting and looking at the same angle of the screen. But speaking of dancing and running, I remember from my marathon days, I was asking someone, how do you keep this rhythm? And they call it rhythm. They use the word rhythm, they don't call anything else. And especially the longer you run, they all have a rhythm. Many of them have a song. They have their favorite song, or a playlist. They can have one. But if you talk to people like David Goggins, he said he has the Guinness World Record for a bunch of things, but one of them was the maximum amount of pull-ups in 24 hours or something, and he went into thousands. And he had one song in his head, and he said he was just listening to that rhythm while doing it. And in running, they told me, I mean, there are many techniques, but the one they showed me and I tried it out, and it drastically changed my running. They said, hold as if you're holding an imaginary crisp in your hand without breaking it. So for people in the US, it is a chip, potato chips. In the
Mhm.
UK, it's crisps. Uh, but your hand is like this, and you're swinging like this with the center of the body as the center. So left leg, right leg, left hand. And as you keep doing it, you're using gravity to your benefit. That makes you run much longer than usual. And effectively, you're dancing, he said. Can you dance for the next 10 minutes just doing like this? And automatically the run became better. The whatever hormones or chemicals needed to change, but your mood changes, you observe things and so forth. And you breathe automatically. You are breathing, you are not trying to breathe, you're breathing.
That's really fascinating, because they talk about this as athletes, even that, you know, certain athletes can run like 5K, 10K, but they can't manage beyond that because of the mental struggle more than anything. You know, like you know, it's interesting because it takes a certain type of person to do marathons. We had the marathon just the other day, right? You know, and it's just interesting. Yeah, I do admire people because. And that's quite an insight, actually. I want to try that because it's something which I've always wanted to do. If my
Okay.
knees and my hips hold up, like my
i'll
ankles,
tell
but
you
yeah,
i'll tell you a very surprising and silly statistic. Okay, it's not a
please,
statistic, it's a calculation. Okay,
yeah,
and I have to get a calculator, get my numbers right, but I'm pretty close because I read it
okay,
recently. If you walk 10,000 steps every day,
yeah,
that's 70 plus marathons in a year. So that means you
okay.
don't really need to go and register for a marathon. If you just do 5K 10K steps, just doing,
Yeah.
going from this room to that room, from this place to that place, and walk more.
Yeah.
And but you do consistently,
Yeah.
put your mind into it so that you enjoy it, not like a robot like you were mentioning.
Yeah. Yeah.
You end up doing 70 plus marathons a year if you do it consistently. Again, like I said, I don't have the calculator to calculate, but what I mean to say is, if you do one small thing
Yeah.
every day, like your Uber friend, if he does 5 minutes every day, but for a year or more, the changes are mind blowing compared to waiting for the
Yeah,
right time in
again, you're right.
life.
This is what I said to him. This is
Yeah,
exactly what I said to him. And because many people find it a chore, the idea to go from nothing to, "Oh, I've got to do an hour of hardcore exercise." One can has to be, consistent and steady, and your body will build and develop.
exactly.
And then, like we said, and then you'll see the materialization of the mental benefits as well. Because yeah, like I'm quite proud of myself now, because as you're saying this, I know that I'm doing lots of marathons then, because every day,
Exactly.
like, my phone always messages me like, "You've done your 10,000, you've done more than
Yeah,
that." Like, and sometimes I'm not even got my phone with me, right? Because I'm running around on a football pitch or in an MMA class. So it's
yeah,
nice to know that the body is still operating, but it's
yeah.
only because, as I say, I was fortunate that as a youngster, my parents made the effort, put me into sports classes, put me into different things, and through my learning as a coach and as a teacher and everything other, you start to recognize why it's so important. Even if you talk about tribal senses, when I was a literature student and you study things of the past, it's
Mhm.
interesting to know why hunter gatherers, didn't have the same mental health issues that we do in the modern age, right?
Yeah, yeah,
um and you can obviously see those on social media, the boom of like this industry of well-being,
yeah.
especially from a fitness standpoint. If you look at the fitness industry generally, like, it's
Hmm.
because we are now compartmentalizing that. I go to the office, then I go to the gym. I go to the office, then I go. That's, whereas really and truly, our life should be more physical as a holistic kind of sense, right? But
Yeah.
it does take an effort in some way,
But the
because
key
you have to
word is
break your
holistic.
molds.
The key
Yeah,
word is
yeah, yeah.
holistic. When you combine the A with the M, with the P, with the L, with the E, and so forth,
I like that.
that
Give me a
really,
run.
yeah, exactly. You're a rapper. So,
You sounded like you're about to break into like a Run DMC rap, bro. I like it. A to the E to the
so,
P, or even the garage thing, jungle things. But anyway, sorry, apologies. The music in me. But yeah,
so, yeah. So here,
when you
there
combine
has
them, yeah,
been
when
some
you combine
experiment.
them, yeah,
Yeah, there has been some experiments in the late 80s, and it has been repeated many times. But the original experiment was in Mexico slash US, or Mexican employees in the US. They were hotel employees. Many of them were obese in that hotel chain of hotels, and they found that these people are walking all day. They walk up the floor, down the floor. They're constantly cleaning things, changing sheets, doing this and doing that, and so forth. But they were very surprised to see why they're not losing weight. And there were two sets, in fact, three sets, and it has been repeated many, many times, and the same results are coming. They told a group of maids, you're already doing equivalent of these many marathons, you're already fit compared to the average American, you walk more, you should be proud of yourself, and you should feel good that as part of your job you're already walking 10,000, 15,000 steps, so it's a good thing you're doing. Then there was the other group, they did not say anything to them, and just life as usual so that they can compare it. And they started finding within 2 weeks, the group which actually is more mindful and praises themselves that, you know what, as part of my job itself, I am doing this.
yeah,
They started being in better shape physically and mentally. They started feeling good about their own work. They took pride in their work. And so, if you just do M for mental and just do affirmations and other things, or just do P for physical and so forth, the result is lesser compared to when you combine the two and combine all of it,
100%.
like I was saying. And this is where, when you become mindful, oh, now I'm already doing those 10,000 steps, then it starts affecting the subconscious, actually starts helping you because you're combining the two.
100%. 100%. I think there's a doctor recently on a podcast that I listened to where they're talking about cortisol and stress
Hmm.
and how
Hmm.
fat stores when you're stressed, and like, it's interesting. So like when you, like you say, when you combine M with the P, and you start to understand and manage your own emotional and stress levels and everything other, and you're doing exercise, the weight just drops off you, right? And it's not that weight is everything, but one has to also admit, like, to themselves, that we do feel better about ourselves when we feel we look healthier, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You feel better about yourself when you feel you have more mobility. This gentleman said that when I tied my shoes, I kept feeling my belly in between, right? So,
Right.
it's I hear it from clients, whilst it's not about body shaming, it's just understanding that, you know it contributes to so many things, even from a standpoint of like your body breakdown, from arthritic standpoints, right? If you're carrying so much excess weight on your joints, it can really have an impact in terms of your longevity of life, right?
Correct.
So
Yeah.
there's so many reasons, from the physical standpoint, but like we always like to bring it back to the holistic, as we said. So if you're doing things where you're expressing yourself, you're journaling, you're talking to people, you're also doing artistic stuff through movement, painting, arts, dance, everything other. You're looking at the mental, you're focusing on like all the aspects of like, exploring. Um, yeah, when you add the physical to it, it just does wonders. It does wonders
Exactly.
because it's the driving force of your being a physical, moving human, right?
Exactly. I know today we wanted to do a shorter session because we want to have a longer session or a similar duration still on the physical side, because many
Yeah,
of the coaches have given me feedback that whatever they teach, then they ask to convert something physically. As an example, let's say, um, I'm taking a very, let's, for the lack of a word, fluffy thing and adding it to a physical thing. As an
yeah,
example, are you feeling relatively happier? I'm not saying happiest or something. Or are you feeling
yeah,
calmer, as a word or a mental thing? And
yeah,
then you combine it. Where are you feeling that calmness? Is it here? Is it in your breath? Is it in your eyes? Is it in the heaviness of your head? And if you combine those affirmations and new belief systems and so forth, but then associate with the fact that whenever I feel courageous, I actually feel sit like this compared to slouching,
yeah,
and there is a
yeah, yeah, yeah.
physical element around it, you see. And that really changes, and I think we should talk a bit more about
Absolutely.
it. Tell me, one thing people could do in their so-called busy lives before we close.
Well, I suppose it's as I mentioned to this gentleman. It seems to become a feature of our conversation, but I just said, look, ultimately, everyone still has passions and excitements. And if you are struggling to find something that you are currently passionate about, then be curious and do something new. Discover something, right? But don't see it as a chore that I
Not as a
have to
chore.
do
Yeah.
exercise, right?
Yeah.
Find something that you find interesting that just
Hmm.
involves a bit of movement. And even if it's just once a week for an hour, it will give you respite in so many other ways from your routines and from your other kind of stresses, that I guarantee within weeks you'll be doing more things and adding to your physical therapies, if you like, right? Your physical commitments, because as I say, like even say like my father, he went to an art class. There's
Hmm.
an aspect of physicality in painting, right?
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
right. So again, it's so important, some form of movement. And as a 70-year-old man, he recognized how it really boosted him in all aspects, mentally, hard to regain some enthusiasm, some motivation, or you're struggling to think, but what would I do? I've never had any hobbies or habits. Be curious like a kid would, and just go try something,
Give it a
and
shot.
start
Yeah.
small, and just and see where it goes from there. Like don't worry,
Start
don't think
small.
about it.
Start
Yeah,
small. Do it often and enjoy it.
there you go. Simple.
Simple.
See what I did? See what I
Exactly.
did there? Simple.
Yeah, exactly. For the audience who don't know, ample and simple are our frameworks, and we will be talking more. So please dial back, please come back. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us. We talk about how to remove anxiety in our day-to-day life, and especially for men, because there is a lot of stigma around still, and it's really not a fluffy subject. It's really not a thing to be ashamed of. It is something that is as natural as breathing. So why not take care of each other? And so yeah, please keep tuning again, and we'll be back next time with more about the P for physical, and then we'll go to the other letters L and E to complete the sequence. In between these, we'll also be doing some question and answer sessions. So please send your questions. We have been getting some very interesting questions. We try not to share who has asked it, so that it can be anonymous and you can feel safe about sending any question. But if you know that you got your answer while you are listening, we take care of that. Thank you so much, Inayat, again, and see you next time.